Good morning, everyone. How nice to be here with you. Today is Monday, and on Monday I remind you that the mission of the Masters, which is how I feel about the work that I'm doing, needs your support in order to continue. You've been just wonderful in helping to keep this alive. So you can donate on an ongoing basis through Patreon. Patreon is this brilliant website for bringing people together, creative people with work that they want to do and others who have the resources to support that work. You can go on, you might find others besides myself that you want to support, which is also a really good idea. And if you go to my own website, ashajoy.org, you'll find a donate button there, and it takes you right to a Mission of the Masters donation site. Lately we've been working on getting the Spanish translation of Light Bearer published, the Italian translation published through Ananda Publications. We haven't sold any of these to any local publishers there. We're also going to redo the index on Light Bearer, the book Light Bearer. I've never been satisfied with it, and it was my fault. I wasn't paying attention. But I've just made arrangements this morning to have the index, the effort done to redo the index, because it turns out when you start going to other languages, they keep using the same index, and I just couldn't. It's very professionally done, but it's not very user-friendly, the index as it is. Even I, who know what's in the book, can't find things through the index. So we're going to start that over. That's a personal need of mine. And also we've been continuing on audiobooks for crystal clarity, taking titles of Swamiji's and converting them into audiobooks, since that's how so many people like to read these days. And other people are engaged in that work besides me, so we're expanding our support of the mission of the Masters. And all of it is because of you. So please keep it up if you feel to. It's a great service to bring light into the world. And also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. We're taking a long time to get up past 10,000 subscribers, and it would just be, it would just be fun to have that little number turn over. And that will give you email notification, I believe, every time we post something new, which is pretty often, so you'll get lots of emails from us. Okay, my friends, let's say a prayer and then we'll start. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master Paramahansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, dear friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Help us to live in the light of your guiding presence, to know that we are not alone in this world, but are acting always as your instruments. Elevate our consciousness, calm our hearts, clarify our minds, that we may feel you with us and act in harmony with your will. Om. Peace. Amen. Okay, my friends, we are still in the chapter about loyalty. We might get through it today. It's called Leadership Means Loyalty. Oh yes, I got quite distracted by the wording of the titles. That's what happened last session. So now we are talking about how to appropriately give feedback to people. Wait until the right time to speak, when what you have to tell him will do the most good. For if you speak at the wrong time, you may never get another chance. When next you raise the issue, he will be likely to remember only the inauspicious time when you said that already. I was thinking about this in terms of actual life experience that I've had, in terms of bringing up difficult subjects with people. There is a technique, and of course most of my life has lived in an ashram setting where there's a shared understanding, but even if people don't know that you're praying to God, even if people don't know that you have friends in high places who will inspire and guide you, you can still bring that energy to bear in any situation. And I find it especially helpful when I want to communicate something to someone, but I'm really not sure about their receptivity. It takes a lot of intuition to be able to feel what a person is really ready to hear. Now, of course, a leader should devote himself to developing that kind of intuition, but it's a high level skill. But we can also take advantage of our understanding that all of human consciousness is linked on a more subtle dimension. So even though there is this feeling that we're separate from one another, and how can I know what you're really thinking unless you tell me? There's lots of levels at which the apparent separation dissolves. And when we are deeply sincere in our desire to be genuinely helpful to other people, these higher forces also cooperate with us. Now, I'm a devotee, and I can say simply, God and Divine Mother tell me. My guru tells me. It doesn't matter what you call it. The fact is that power is there, that we can draw on it. And the way we always think about it is we have the conscious mind, and then we have the superconscious mind. And the superconscious mind is linked to the greater reality, and it is in the superconscious mind that the apparent separation between people also begins to dissolve. The other element here is that all of us, whether we're conscious of it or not, are on a divine journey from lack of awareness to infinite awareness. And all of us are being guided by our own superconscious self, which is to say, the divine self, the soul. All of us are being guided from a higher level. And every action that we take, even if it is only to continue to explore a bad idea in order to have enough experience to realize that it's a bad idea, all of it is the inexorable, inescapable soul force moving us toward greater awareness. Sometimes a woman friend of mine had several children, and one of her children was he was a wild card. There was no other way you could say it. He just did everything that was based on ignorance that was not really going to work. And he actually ended up dying in a shootout with the police. I mean, it's, pretty dramatic. But that's what happened to him. And the woman was very spiritual and just mothered this child as best she could, but that was the destiny. There was also the influence of the father and other environmental things. But through prayer, she came to understand that this child, as the way it was explained, was, we swim away from our own, we move away from our own higher interests for many incarnations. We become infatuated with our egoic separateness. Even in our Festival of Light, which is the inspired ritual that Swami Kriyananda gave us to include every week in our Sunday satsang, there's the first stage of the soul's manifestation from the divine, in which it's a holy mission, and we are commissioned by God to learn great lessons from life, to be fruitful in the gifts you have given us, and what we gain to share with others. And that's what we're supposed to do. The second stage is called the revolt. And the little bird, because it's an allegory of this little bird, becomes enamored of his own power. And he begins to think, what is this business about sharing with others? The right thing to do here is to just get for myself and enjoy as much as I can. And so thus, the soul enters the second stage, which is called the revolt. We're revolting against the idea that we have some divine purpose here, that we have a mission, that being generous-hearted and selfless is really where happiness lies. No, I can tell from my own experience. what else is wisdom if not to keep what is mine for myself? That's what the little bird protests. And we keep trying that, even though, again from the festival, even though repeatedly we lost everything we had. And this is the strange recital, that the strange process we go through. The third stage, just to finish, is the quest. It gradually occurs to us that what I'm doing isn't working. We don't necessarily know what the right way is, but we begin to ask the question, what is really, what is wisdom? What is reality? Where does happiness really come from? And that's where most of us live. We live in the quest. We're constantly trying to understand. And then finally comes the redemption, the fourth stage, where all confusion is resolved. And now we return to our mission, but now we return not with innocence, not with untried optimism, but with hard-won wisdom. So when we're working with people, you know, some people are at the stage of the quest, and they're genuinely interested in what's true. And of course, they're much easier to work with because they're alert to their own experience. They're alert to their own impersonal role in what does and doesn't work well. They're genuinely and sincerely interested in the quest, not just in defending a predetermined position, but actually understanding what's true. But even very sincere people still fall back into the revolt, where what is wisdom is to protect myself. Why should I be open? It's much safer and better to be closed. But in the midst of all of this, soul wisdom never disappears. It may be unheeded for a while, but it is always in charge. So I was starting to speak about this poor woman whose son was killed in such a dramatic way. Her understanding of that soul's destiny, because she had a deep psychic attunement to things, she felt like he was a soul, as she put it, you know, we swim away from our own best interests. We follow the revolt, and we just keep swimming away. We're swimming away until it becomes unbearable, until the suffering, until the effort to open up to a new understanding seems less painful than to continue as we are. We continue as we are even when it's miserable, if the effort to change seems more miserable. This is the cycle that those who go through substance addiction will always tell you. They call it, you have to hit the bottom. And the way she talked about it is you swim away from your own best interest until you reach the farthest point, and then you make a U-turn and you start coming back. Now that you may zig and zag a little bit, but you make a U-turn and start coming back. And she felt that the child that she had raised, who had died in such an unfortunate way, she just said, he's still swimming away from the light. She said, maybe this experience will be enough. Of course, he obviously was ready to at least begin to consider, because he was born into her family. He was born to her, who did everything she could to bring him to that U-turn. But sometimes people just have to keep going. I know in the course of this series I talked about that, about, you know, people, let me think what I was remembering. The Divine Mother knows that that's what has to happen. And she suffers with us, but she doesn't object, because she knows that's the only way we're ever going to learn. And so she loves us as we swim away from the light. She loves us just the same. And I mentioned in various contexts, at a time like this, where it's such a tumultuous transition from Kali Yuga, the age of form, into Dwapara Yuga, the age of energy, this is a great time for a lot of people who need to destroy things. A lot of egoic, selfish, mean-spirited, even, but in some cases, very powerful people who think that what else is wisdom if not to get for myself, and what do I care about you, and truth is only what serves my cause. Just look around this planet right now. There's lots of them. And we have these absolutely morally depraved people making entertainment for us left, right, and center that are just destroying any idealism we have. I mean, it's a very grim picture, except that it isn't. But because we are actually going into the light. But these demons, demonically influenced individuals, Divine Mother is letting them have their turn. And so they're just running around destroying stuff like this. But their souls are also in charge. And their souls know how far do you want to push this before you're going to realize that this is never going to bring you what you want. And we were they, and they have a right, and Divine Mother knows what she's doing. But coming all the way back to where it regards you and the people that work for you, everyone has a superconscious nature. And a very interesting technique that I have found to be extremely useful is that I don't just pray to God to help me know what to say to you. I pray to you. And I'm not praying to your ego. I'm not praying, tell me how to protect you and give you exactly what you want and pretend that your totally misguided point of view is actually a good point of view. There's an expression that people use, and I have a personal difficulty with it, that you have to, quote, hold space for everybody's point of view. I don't think so. I think some people's points of view, they may be sincerely held. You may be unable to shift them in the moment from what they're doing, but I don't want to hold space for it because it is not helpful to the person who's holding that point of view. They need to awaken to something beyond it. Now that's different than saying I have a right to bully you into taking my point of view, or that I could even persuade you if you're totally fixed. But I do not want to make it like an okay alternative if I know for a fact that it is not helping you. Now I may have to be at peace with myself that this just isn't the time, that I'm just going to have to patiently wait and just allow you to have the experience you have. I remember when someone who was very dear to Swamiji, who'd been living for many years in the community, but various things happened. And other karma began to dominate, and then that person made the choice to leave the ashram. They weren't negative, they were just caught between a number of karmas, and the karma they chose took them away. Swami said very simply, I wept all night, because he knew that then it was going to be a long cycle of other kinds of experience before that soul was able to come back to where they were standing right at that moment. But they were going to take a long karmic journey. Master, on several occasions, was seen to be weeping because he knew that despite everything that he was offering, that a particular disciple who was dear to Master was just going to have to let the world be his teacher again. In Autobiography of a Yogi, there's an example of Sri Yukteswar, Master's guru, who became very, I don't want to use words that are the wrong words, let me say, but he had great hopes for this man in his ashram named Kumar. And as Master said, Kumar's charms were lost on the other ashramites, but Master saw something in him that the others didn't see. And he did his very best to help him. But at a certain point, that young man, Kumar, told his guru he was going to go back and visit his village. Sri Yukteswar gently hinted that that would not be a good idea, but Kumar ignored his guru's gentle hints. His guru did not confront him. Sri Yukteswar, we have this picture of Sri Yukteswar being this frank, tell it like it is person, but he did not say to Kumar, don't do it. He just gently hinted that it would not be in his best interest. The disciple ignored that. He went back to his village for a time, and when he came back, as Yogananda put it, he said, the stately yogi that Sri Yukteswar had admired was completely gone, and what before us now was only a coarse peasant who had picked up some unsuitable habits that made it impossible for him to continue in the ashram. But Sri Yukteswar was so heartbroken, he had to have Yogananda tell him that he couldn't stay anymore. And so it's like God loves us no matter what we're doing. And God suffers profoundly when we make choices that will cause us to suffer more. That's why they suffer. It's not because you've displeased them or you've sinned or you've disappointed them or they had such high hopes and now their hopes are dashed. None of those things. It's because they know how to free us from suffering. And when we reject that freedom, there's nothing they can do but mourn. So all the way back to, here we are sitting in front of a coworker, and I've been in this exact position before, and I just don't know whether or not what I'm going to say is going to be, what I could say is going to be helpful or harmful. So just without making any deal about it, but just inwardly looking at whoever I'm talking to, perhaps concentrating a little more at their spiritual eye than at their two physical eyes, I say, what do you want me to do? How can I help you? I have this thought of what I'm going to say. Do you want to hear it? Are you ready to hear it? And I'm not talking to the ego, I'm talking to the superconscious. Enlighten me. And one of two things have happened when I've done this, and it's usually been pretty extreme. It's been one or the other. I will make that prayer, I will have a thought in my mind, and the thought will vaporize from my mind, vaporize. And never in the rest of the conversation will it occur to me. It just won't even, it's not even like I think about it and reject it. It's just gone. And like a week or two later, literally, I'll remember, oh yeah, I had thought to say this. But instead I said, is this going to be helpful? And I guess it wasn't going to be helpful because it just totally went away. And on other occasions, again, literally, I've offered that prayer. And then very soon after, the person themselves will say, I've been thinking. I was wondering if, do you think this is a good idea? Exactly. And it's like, well, I think that's a pretty clear answer. But then it's not even I who am prying the door open. It's they who are inviting me into the story. Now, of course, it's not always such a dramatic moment. You don't have to have such a dramatic moment. But ask the soul of the person you're trying to help, how can I help you? How can I serve you? What is it that you want and need from me? And the other technique is also a really simple one, which is take it a step at a time. There's this tremendous tendency to sort of put the whole story out before you allow the person even to respond to you. It's a debater's technique. I was raised in a family where my brother was a competitive debater and I was involved in it a little bit. And debate is sort of a certain way of well, I would say of not communicating, but it's a game you play, and it's a fun game. It's an intellectual game, and it's fun. But the nature of debate is that you have your best arguments and you put out all your best arguments. This is also one reason why, if at all possible, speak to people face to face, do not write emails. Because there's a tremendous tendency in an email to start the conversation as a debate. I've been thinking point 1, point 2, point 2A, point 2B, and you put out every single argument, your best argument, and the person receiving it just gets a tsunami without giving you any chance to find out where they're going with this. And don't do the same either in conversation. I've watched Swami, and I mentioned this, I believe, in another context. There was a man who'd made a certain decision, and that decision had taken him physically away from Ananda. Swamiji did not feel that the decision that he made was in his own best interest spiritually, but Swami is very adept. And he also knew this man was not receptive to Swami's suggestion. And it was the long-range loyalty that Swamiji had to this man was that, I need to maintain the connection with him more than I need him to not do this. So Swami would he couldn't deter him, so he supported him. And he, as far as the man was concerned, Swami was completely on his side. And Swami, I mean, of course, this is a multi-incarnational spiritual relationship that Swami has with people. But he totally did support him. The fact that what he was doing was not really all that wise was so minor compared to the friendship and the loyalty that Swami had to him. And I happened to observe this, as I did many things in Swami's life. Every time that man circled back and Swami was in his company, which for some reason most of the time I was also present, Swami would just, and I would watch him, Swami would just start a very light conversation, just a light conversation about what he was doing and how he was going and what did he think about what he was doing. And every time, the man would just be totally committed to the direction. And as soon as Swami saw that he was totally committed, then Swami started helping him with his project. Until finally, things weren't going so well. This was many years. Finally, things weren't going so well. The guy was getting a little discouraged. And he said to Swami, I've been thinking about just returning to live in Ananda. And all Swami said was, oh, I think that would be a very nice idea. That was it. No? But Swami held him with his heart, held him with his friendship, and had this very, very, very long-range view. Now, in an ashram, you have that luxury. In a corporation, you may not. But some of what Swami was doing, which is, where is your consciousness? What is your level of understanding? And I remember once, I myself Swami had given me certain advice, and it was good advice, and perhaps my life would have been different if I had followed it, who knows? But I just couldn't. I just was beyond me. He had more faith in me than I had capacity in myself. And by that point in my life, it was important to me that I be honest with Swami. Years earlier, I would have just pretended. I said, sir, you've asked me to do this, but I just can't do it. And Swami, he didn't take an extra breath. He just said, well, so much for theory, let's deal with reality. And then he immediately just made an alternate suggestion to me, which was not a bad suggestion at all. It was just within my range to do it. It's like it doesn't do any good to put upon people an expectation that they can't fulfill, either because they're not willing or simply because they're not able, whatever it might be. So what we really have to feel is that, we have to know and respect and work with the reality of the people who are working with us. And spinning theories in the air, you can do that for your own entertainment, but when we are one-to-one, the question has to be, how can I help you? God bless you.